Welcome to the Make Time for Success podcast. I'm Dr. Christine Lee, and this is episode number 101. I've got some super fun news to share with you today before I introduce our next special guest. If you're by a newsstand and it's the winter of 2022, I'm going to ask that you search for Oprah's magazine, the Favorite Things edition, as there's an article in it called There's a Coach for That. And the surprise news is that yours truly, Dr. Christine Lee, is a featured coach inside that fun article. The article was a breeze to participate in, and I'm happy to say that. But upon reflection, I've been thinking that it's taken me years of preparation to have that article feel like a breeze. I've prepared by working on my communication, my messaging, how I show up, my confidence level, all of those things. And that is my segue into introducing our special guest today. His name is Rob Lawrence. He is a coach, author, and podcast mentor who helps coaches like me and creative entrepreneurs and business leaders reach thousands of listeners every day through the power of their own voice and message and the power of podcasting. He is behind the scenes on many shows and occasionally hosts the Odd Series. And his own podcast, Inspirational Creatives, features lots of conversations with amazing artists, producers, coaches, and entrepreneurs who offer stories and strategies to help you create the life and living you want. Rob is the kind of mentor and colleague that you want on your side when you're on your own journey to taking your message to the world. Listen into this episode to get inspired to share your own voice and your own creative genius with the world. Let's go listen to the episode now. Hi, I'm Dr. Christine Lee, and I'm a psychologist and a procrastination coach. I've helped thousands of people move past procrastination and overwhelm so they could begin working to their potential. In this podcast, you're going to learn powerful strategies for getting your mind, body, and energy to work together so that you can focus on what's really important and accomplish the goals you want to achieve. When you start living within your full power, you're going to see how being productive can be easy and how you can create success on demand. Welcome to the Make Time for Success podcast. Hello, my dear listeners. This is Dr. Christine Lee, and today I'm feeling really calm despite some recent tech issues. And I want to thank Rob Lawrence, my guest today, for being patient as I sorted all of those out. Rob and I know each other from a ways back when I was on his podcast, Inspirational Creatives. And I just love this man. I love his work. I love his thoughtfulness. His kindness to me has just carried me through the years of podcasting and being a pre-podcaster and a current podcast host. So thank you, Rob, for that. And welcome to the show.
Christine, it's an absolute pleasure. Lovely to be here.
So Rob is many things. He's a creative. He's an author. He's a coach. He's a podcast mentor. And he's been a very busy man. He works really thoroughly. Like I said earlier, his podcast episode with me reflected just his care for his craft. Each episode is really detailed. He intersperses his commentary with the guests' work and reflections, and it just creates such a nice atmosphere for people. But I want you all to get to know Rob and his backstory too. So Rob, could you let us know how you got to be who you are today and what lights you up?
Well, what lights me up is doing this and connecting, with you, Christine. And it's certainly in this digital day and age that we live in now, sort of post-pandemic, where most of us, with very few exceptions, were forced to connect with each other, not in person, but online. And as much as I enjoy and I still do to this day, nothing beats proper human interaction where you're actually together with somebody sharing space in a room. But the next best thing can be this wonderful opportunity to be able to connect with people across the world, across time zones in this way, to share ideas. And I think one of the wonderful things that this age has brought us in my lifetime is the ability to connect almost instantaneously with somebody across the planet, somebody who perhaps cares about the same thing that we do or thinks about something that we care about. And what that has begun to bring into my life over the last few years is a tremendous diversity in terms of thinking, in terms of cultural values, stories, ideas. And that is very exciting to me. And it really does, to your point there about, what makes me jump out of bed every morning is this curiosity of who am I going to meet today and what am I going to learn today? And I hope also what value can I give today in terms of how can I help somebody today? And I've learned recently that my style of motivation, I'm highly motivated when I can experience and see the results of the work that I do. I have to say that, though, part of my motivation today accepts the fact that you don't see a lot of the ripple effect of what you do, particularly with podcasting. You might see some numbers on a screen that suggest your episode's been downloaded many times. And that again kind of inspires my curiosity to wonder where in the world those downloads have gone and who that conversation might have inspired. But I get glimpses of it, and it's those glimpses that keep me highly motivated, because really on the odd occasion where I do see the results of the work that I do through podcasts and podcasting, working with others, I just multiply that. I just think, well, just seeing that small thing there for me is enough to keep me going and motivated to keep doing what I'm doing. But to think that actually I know it's having a more multiple effect than what I actually get to witness is highly inspiring. So
that is a lovely, thank you for teaching me that, because I don't tend to have that atmosphere in my head. I'm thinking, oh, wow, that many downloads sometimes. And I need to adopt more of an abundant mindset when it comes to the impact that I might be having with my show and this podcast and my work. So thank you for that. That was a lovely surprise lesson I didn't think I was going to get. I find myself curious, what is it about you as a person dropped on this planet that makes you interested in connecting with people? What is so appealing about that? How did you recognize that? When did you first realize that?
It's a lovely question. I can't say I can answer that. And what I mean by that is I'm still learning. And that's part of the fun, I think, of doing what we do. As every day I learn about myself and I learn something new. And I'm not sure I'll ever reach some kind of final summary or conclusion, but it's just going to be an ongoing learning journey for me. And that in itself is highly motivating, I find. But more specifically, I think I'm a very sort of feeling-centered person. So, a lot of my energy is based around emotion. And for me, it's hard to, switch off my biases, but audio for me is a format that highly resonates with who I am. And what I mean by that is, don't get me wrong, I love watching films. I love reading books, and they move me, but they don't move me in the same way that audio does. Both music, even just walking in nature, birdsong, that sort of thing, and listening to podcasts. But what it is that particularly moves me about listening to something like a podcast, for example, is the emotion in somebody's voice. It's not just what they're saying, it's how they're saying it. And for whatever reason, and reasons I can't describe, you may know more, Christine. But for whatever reasons, when I'm deeply immersed in that experience, physiologically, I am feeling things. That's an adventure in itself. And that's always been the case. I've never known my life without that. And I've got very early, very, very early recollections of when I was very young, pair of headphones on, either listening to music or the radio, and that just moving me or taking me to a place that I, wouldn't experience anywhere else. And it's the power of that movement, the sort of magnitude of that experience, which is what has drawn me back to the audio space, because there was a period of my life where I was far away from that with a corporate career, and I realized actually I was becoming quite miserable, and that was why I've since learned that I'd lost that connection with audio in a deep way anyway. And I now know that about me, that actually it has to be quite central to my life as a coach and also as a podcast producer, and outside of that work too, in my personal life as well. It's a very sort of central thing. So sound is always with me. It's a realm that I love to be in. It's a mystery. It's a complete mystery to me. But I find that a very exciting aspect of being human.
Okay. I love that. You managed to answer the question I was trying to come up with, which was there ever a period of time when you were blocked from connecting with what comes naturally to you and what you enjoy? So thank you for doing that. And I would say in your work, interviewing many, many creative people for your show and your business and in your coaching career, have you noticed that people tend to align with a particular sense or a particular strong trait that they have, and that allows them to open up their creativity? What is your sense of how the creative genius gets to be put forth?
Yeah, I think these days, the work I do with people around the podcasting stuff is quite deep work. So I'm often, if it's not a little bit of tech support, it's usually working on their confidence or helping them to find and shape their voice and message. And that's where a lot of people get stuck. So coming back to your point there about being stuck, I think we do know what it is. I think we can find it, but we put a lot of stuff in the way. And that's certainly what happened for me, for all sorts of different reasons that you and I have discussed on other podcasts before. So today, people tend to arrive at my doorstep or on the phone or via Zoom or what have you, when they're pretty clear that the audio format is their strength and the podcast is their strength. And they've dabbled around. It's about podcasts or audio for them. Predominantly, they might be doing the other things, but it's the predominant channel that they want to express themselves through. In the earlier days, I was sort of sifting and sorting the different types of clients I wanted to work with. And I was finding that actually, you're absolutely right. There are different people that work in different ways, well, with different formats. And I know many writers, and without doubt, poets, writers, authors, that is their predominant format. They might do a bit of podcasting. And sometimes I will work with them as well, because it's actually more, it is about developing their, their story sometimes, or their actual voice and approach when it actually comes to talking on a podcast, I suppose, for want of a better description. But yeah, people do have different strengths. And I think that one of the big things that stuck out for me, and perhaps a really valuable lesson that I've learned over the years, and I hope many of those that I've worked with have learned as well, is that actually, if we are struggling, it's often for one of two reasons. So say we're trying to make a video, or say we're trying to make an audio piece. And if we're struggling, there's usually one or two reasons. One, it isn't our forte. That isn't our strength. And we're trying to kind of do something that just isn't actually in harmony with who we are. The other is that this is what we're going to do, but they're trying to do too much too soon. So this is a strength, but they're trying to run before they can walk, if you see what I mean. So often I find myself working with people in that scenario, if they're still in that phase of discovery and figuring out which is the right medium for them.
Yes. And I have seen that it's really difficult to, I guess, be in the situation where you know where you want to end up and arrive eventually, and then feel like you have to wait and work on the skills that you think are already ready to go to the end point. And I found that people don't really see, myself included, the parts that are still missing or still need development. And I myself went through some voice coaching with the lovely and amazing and talented Tracy Goodwin. And I feel so much more confidently about my voice, but I didn't even know what was up with my voice. It's something so intangible and unknowable. We can't take a picture of it, but somehow somebody had the skill to shift me out of feeling blocked all the time to feeling incredibly open. So you do wonderful work. So thank you for being that thoughtful coach who is sensitive to where the person is on their journey too. I can see that just in how you're describing your clients. What could you say might be the biggest confidence blocks? If you could get a little more detailed about some examples or something that maybe even you have gone through.
Yeah. So I think to your point there, Christine, one of the big confidence blocks for quite a few of those folks that I've worked with is this thing about hearing their own voice, because there is an element, I suppose, of review. If you're going to create a podcast, you need, or you probably would want to listen back to the work that you've created. It's kind of like looking at your own drawing to sort of know what to do with it next, or to maybe make some suggestions in terms of edits or presentation. So I think for most people, they feel there's an inevitable step that they have to take, which is to review the audio that they've recorded. But even that is quite hard for many. Even some of the more, which just fascinates me really, even some of the more experienced business leaders that I work with who are fabulous keynote speakers, yet they're, nervous or frightened about listening back to their own recorded voice. And so I think that can be a block in itself. And it shows up in a variety of different ways sometimes. And that's quite curious to me as well, before we actually get to the nub and the root of that's what really is going on here. It's about listening back to yourself. And thankfully, I experienced a similar sort of version of that myself in the early days of podcasting. So I had to kind of overcome some of my own blocks with that, which was I've found very useful, because when people do have that as a block, I can relate with them and I can relate to what they're experiencing and how that felt. So that's really useful to me. So I would say that's one of the more predominant kind of confidence things. Other things that perhaps stop people in their tracks are things like what to create, what content. So that's always a fascinating one to me, because once I get people talking, I'm always fascinated by their story and what they know and what they have to say, but they can't see that. And it's that classic thing of many of us, most of the time, don't appreciate our own strengths because they come so naturally to us. And what we know and our experience and our story is sometimes even boring to us because we may have said it many times, or we're so close to it, we can't see how it is special compared to somebody else. It's that comparison thing that we're doing there. Yet I'm there in awe of what people have to say. And I'm like, there's so much here. So I think sometimes there's a block that comes around the actual creative element, which is creating the content. I don't know what content to create. I don't know what I would say or how I would say it. And then when we start to go through a process of actually breaking that down and putting it together, then I think we almost experience the opposite, which is overwhelmed. Then there's just so much I could be talking about, and there's so much that then there's a lot of sort of editing and curation that sort of then takes place in terms of, well, what's the listener's journey going to be, either in an episode or over a series of episodes. And then we try and figure out of their story and what they know, what's going to be the best way to put all of this stuff together in an inspiring and listenable way. So that's another one. And then I think behind that, I mean, there's of course many, many others, but these are the more common ones. Another one is the tech side of things. It's just about having confidence with the tech, and also just using the tech in the right way, because there's a lot of great wisdom out there on YouTube and whatnot about how to start a podcast, and this is the mic that you should buy and all the rest of it. But actually, like so many disciplines and crafts and other things that we can do, actually it's sometimes about finding the right tool for the right job. There isn't necessarily a one size fits all, which is what you'll find common wisdom about podcasting on the internet, is like, this is how to do it. I don't subscribe to that. I mean, there are some core principles, I agree with that, but I actually think that for most people it is a craft. For most people, they have their own journey. There is a way that's going to work best for them. There is a mic that's probably going to be more appropriate for them. Maybe sometimes the reason they don't like the sound of their voice is perhaps they've not got the right mic in the right room, so they're not hearing their voice in the right way. So it's emphasizing the wrong elements of their voice. So I think there's the tech stuff, and I feel again blessed when in my own journey I had this deviation in a corporate career in technology, which I loved, but for different reasons, for sort of 15 years. But that gave me I didn't appreciate it at the time, but I certainly appreciate it now. That's given me a really good grounding in trying to solve technical problems, and also this ability to be able to describe what is sometimes quite a complex technical concept, but in a really simple way, so that people can, get a handle on it and be able to use it in a way that's going to be to their advantage. So I would say they're the three most common stumbling blocks for people.
Thank you for sharing those. I loved that list. And you make me think that maybe one thing that would help people to produce and create and be more confident is to assume that there's a state of flow inside of them ready to go, and that they need to set the stage, the proverbial stage, and the right technology to support them. But that doesn't indicate a lack of ability. And I think that the creator, whatever you're doing, a paper, a music piece, a podcast episode, that the scary stuff happens when we veer into the belief that there's something wrong with us.
Yeah.
And then we don't have any room for the creativity to flow, come out, peak out, start. And then we get into other types of issues, which that's my area, where people then stop performing altogether, or they stay off the stage, or they develop some sort of severe block in terms of their senses functioning, literally not being able to speak, turning white on stage, these kinds of things. So thank you for that. I think the assumption there when I heard your list was that you have it in you. You just have to find the right pieces to proceed with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think environment is a very important aspect. And when I talk about environment, I don't just mean the room that we're in, which of course is important, but it's the psychological environment. It's this kind of mental landscape that we create for ourselves about what a podcast is, where I sit within that space, and how I do it. Because again, I think that maybe some of the reason that some people don't even explore it is because they've got a concept of what it should be or how it should be done. But the reality is, I always think of podcasts as a sort of wild west of audio. I mean, really anything goes. And I think also in this day and age, not that there are too many podcasts out there that you've got such fierce competition, it's not worth doing. But I would say there's a tremendous amount of opportunity out there. And within that opportunity, the opportunity to be different and just to do it your way. And I think that having the confidence, to your point there, Christine, about being confident about being you, and bringing your own unique flavor, style, and approach to it would actually benefit you greatly with the podcast, because it will help you stand out from the crowd, and it will also help you to reach the people that are really looking for you, or looking for people like you in the world. So I think that I've heard the phrase that audio is the most honest medium, or something along those lines. And I love that phrase for so many different reasons. For me, it's about the intimacy that it creates. And I think also when you're listening to somebody's voice, you can really hear the emotion in there. I think it's a little bit different to video, where you can get distracted by the visuals sometimes, and maybe there's some other kind of soundtrack stuff going on as well. But I think when you're left with a conversation and a podcast, you can really, there's something that sort of goes on at a much deeper level when you're listening to somebody. You may not even be consciously aware of it, but you're listening to the changes in tone, in pitch, in resonance, and whether somebody's speaking softly or quietly. And I think this is all going on all at the same time. I also kind of feel like sort of neurologically, we kind of rewire our brain in the moment to pay more attention when you haven't got the visual distractions again, like you do with video. And that draws us in to the emotions and what's going on for that person as they're sharing it. And I think that's something to be not concerned about, but to be excited about. Because again, I think it does mean that if you are passionate about something, or if you believe, something that or you say you care about something, that's really going to come across in the audio just by speaking normally, and I think there's something really special about that. So the bar isn't that as high as a lot of people think it is in terms of what do I need to do or how do I need to present myself. I think it may sound almost cliched these days, but genuinely being you is going to be the thing that's really going to help you A, connect with the right people, and B, sort of stand out from the rest as well. So I think the podcast format itself lends itself very well to that, as long as you can sort of stay true to what's right for you rather than being distracted by how podcasting should be done, so to speak.
Okay. Beautiful. I would back up everything that Rob has said so far. I would say not only just a recommendation to put up a podcast if you have the inclination, but also to bring your message to other people's podcasts. You don't necessarily have to host your own. That may be for just a smaller portion of the population, but certainly find people who are talking about similar issues to the ones that you specialize in or care about, and go reach out, because people are looking for guests. People are looking for your voice, and people need to hear your voice too. My next question would be about the idea of crafting your own message and having the courage to really speak with emotion. Could you give us some ideas about how you coach people on really helping them tailor what they're going to focus on, and getting them to believe that it's okay to put this material out, it's okay to show up in this way?
Yeah, it does take a degree of courage. I would agree with that, in the sense that, and like building courage in any area of our life, it's done through practice. And I think, again, the hack here is lots of small amounts of practice can go a long way. In my early experience, I had this where it was just a case of getting used to being in record, because really curious thing seems to happen is we can be having a really good conversation, or I could be having a really good conversation with somebody, and as soon as that red light goes on, and we've got a term for it in the audio industry, which is red light fever. So once that goes on, then all of a sudden the whole conversation changes and everybody tightens up and all the rest of it. So one of the sort of exercises I take a number of people that I work with that struggle with that is just to get so used to being in record all of the time. In fact, one of my own mentors said, as I was learning about audio principles and audio recording, was always be in record. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, you get so used to being in record, you just forget you're in record. The second thing is that sometimes the gold, as you well know, is off air. So if you happen to be in record, you can sometimes capture that gold as well. Now, obviously, of course, this privacy and that type of thing, you know when not to be in record, and of course, being sensitive to that. But I think it's really a case of developing a daily practice, maybe just 5 minutes a day of just hitting record and talking. Really doing that. It sounds simple, but I think as we get used to doing that more and more and more, and to your point there, Christine, I think actually being a guest on another podcast, in all of my experience interviewing others, quite a number of those guests it was the first interview that they've ever done. And I'd like to think, and judging from the feedback, they had an enjoyable experience. But I think sometimes just stretching ourselves that little bit, not giving ourselves the pressure of having to create a whole podcast ourselves in the first instance, but maybe just seeing what that's like. And hopefully it's a little bit easier these days for people, because I think we're getting a bit used to having the cameras on in our own homes. We're getting used to the internet sort of friendly platforms, which when I started recording podcasts weren't available to us. So now I think, this online communication, these platforms are a bit more familiar to us. And even on the Zoom calls, sometimes they're being recorded now. So we're even getting a sense and a bit of experience in terms of what it feels like to be in record. And then I think, to your point there about sort of cultivating our voice and our message, that then comes through a degree of curation. And actually, it comes back to practice again. I think we have to be our own curators, but I think also through the process of practicing and recording, what I've definitely noticed about everyone I've worked with is that they have become better speakers. And I think it's the practice of talking about, as I'm doing with you today, sharing an aspect of their story over and over again. You tend to start to self-curate. And I think the important point about this is it doesn't matter if you get it wrong to begin with. It will be rough and ready in the beginning. And there may be something endearing about that as well, actually. for many, I think a lot of listeners will enjoy that aspect, as vulnerable as you may feel. But if you can embrace that vulnerability and find the courage somehow to just express yourself and talk about your own story. And sometimes another exercise I offer to people is just to get a small handheld recorder and just be in record, but maybe have a short conversation with somebody that they trust, and record that conversation. They can delete that conversation straight after they've recorded it. But again, it's just there's a sort of a kind of double-headed opportunity there to be with that sensation of actually being in record. And then the other thing is actually sharing some of our own story, and actually in the presence of somebody else just listening can give us the experience of what it feels like to be on a podcast. And we can then build on that, just doing more of that, really.
I'm just going to add a little piece that just came to me when I was hearing you suggest that exercise, that I was thinking, well, people are going to have physical reactions to that, like maybe chills up the spine or some sort of tension. And then my thought went to just embrace that, just get used to that. And don't be afraid of that. That is just your body being miraculous. It's just reacting to the scene, but don't assume that that's going to be your reaction every time you tell your story going forward. It just happens to be how you're feeling in the moment. And that is who you are. And that's what we need. So thank you.
Yeah. I love that, Christine. You remind me there. I once heard that, fear and excitement can feel like the same thing. Our body, it has a similar sort of physiological response. And I still, even before this interview, and I've done hundreds, if not thousands now, when I host, I still get those nerves. But I also know that sort of 10 minutes in, as it has done today, that now becomes excitement. The technology's working. We're into the flow of the conversation now. I feel I'm enjoying this space. So I think to your point there is, absolutely. Those sort of physical reactions are quite normal. I loved what we did off air just before we took a few breaths before we came into this conversation. That can be really good practice as well. Whatever it is that helps you to ground and center yourself. Again, I think if you're struggling, or if you're feeling challenged with, you want to do this, but it just feels a bit scary, employ whatever grounding techniques you have. For some, that might be just going for a short walk or whatever it is. Again, I think it's another opportunity to play to our strengths here. So if we've got habits that we've introduced, or if maybe we're developing habits in our life that are positive for us to help us in certain situations, this is another opportunity for that sort of self-growth opportunity for us to practice that. And it really is about developing good habits and then stacking those habits. And I think through that, you can not just creating podcasts, but creating any content with that's how we do it.
Thank you, Rob. You are a master teacher. Thank you so much for sharing your heart and your talent and your experience with us today. I have learned a lot. I've experienced a lot with you. I keep having the thought that you've missed a career in psychotherapy as a therapist because you certainly have the sensibility and that talent of listening to people. So thank you for just bringing yourself on the show today, agreeing to be on with me for this lovely conversation. Could you share with us who you might like to attract as clients and who should get in contact with you and what you can offer them?
Yeah. So the folks I tend to work with most of the time, and it does vary. So I'm always open to an outside inquiry, if you like. And if it's not me, I can probably connect you with somebody that might be a really good fit for who you are and what you do. So predominantly the podcasts I work on are in the personal and professional development space. But that's actually, it sounds like quite a narrow niche, but it's actually quite broad in the sense that attracts business leaders of organizations, social enterprise, coaches, consultants like yourself, Christine. So these people are often very proficient in their own discipline. So they will likely have many years of experience either as a business leader or as a coach or what have you. but they might be new to podcasting, and that's where I can help them. So the people I work with, I just really love working with, and I learn so much from them. And it's because of their experience and their stories that I enjoy doing what I do so much, because I effectively feel like I'm getting paid to do what I love doing anyway, which is playing with the technology and also helping them I mean, I get tremendous satisfaction from helping somebody, being able to solve a problem with somebody, and that collaboration, that connection. So yeah, as I say, I think it's people that are looking to find more people that they want to connect with. So they've probably got a very good idea. In fact, they have got a very good idea of who it is that they're trying to reach. So a lot of the coaches I work with, they've usually got a very good idea of what they're good at coaching at, and they've got ideal clients in mind already. And the chances are that in most cases, in my experience, they've been able to reach more of those types of people through audio. It comes as a surprise, I think, to some people when we go on this journey together, that actually there's a whole world of people out there who predominantly educate and entertain themselves just through audio. So they're not watching YouTube, they're not reading blogs. And these tend to be people that are on the go. You know, they might be walking, commuting, gardening, cycling, at the gym, but they want to be entertained and they want to be educated at the same time. And often the folks I work with, they're the types of people they're trying to reach anyway. And so it's really helpful. It's really exciting for me to be able to help people to, make that connection. So I hope that answers your question, Christine.
It completely does. I want to back up with my recommendation that anyone who feels the inclination to work with Rob, you've got the right inclination. He's fantastic, so kind and so professional and so good at what he does. So thank you again, Rob, for all of this. I know you also have a gift for our listeners. Could you describe what that is?
Yeah. So this was a really popular gift when my podcast first launched nearly 8 years ago. And it was a little one sheet that I created for my audience based on a number of the conversations that I'd had interviewing folks like Pam Slim, that you and I both know.
Yes.
And based on the audience's reaction in terms of what they were looking for. And I summarized it onto this one sheet, and it's 33 ways to create a more prosperous life. So at the time, and the podcast has evolved since, at the time when the podcast first started out, it was the main aim of the podcast was exploring this question of how do we create a living that we love, doing what we love to do creatively. And I summarized sort of some of the key themes that came up, and I ended up with this list of 33, curiously, which is a number which seems to show up in my life in various different ways. And I sometimes tell people it's my favorite record speed as well. So, talk about listening experiences. I still enjoy listening to albums. I'm one of those people. So the number 33 works really well for me. And yeah, this was essentially a handout which I've given to live workshops and also to podcast listeners. And I got a really good response from it. So I just wanted to share that with your audience, because I think most people will find something in there that's really useful. It's a nice little prompt. You can kind of stick it up somewhere that you could just see. You could just have it up for a couple of weeks maybe, and there might be, as you have a glance at it, there might be something on there which inspires you to take a different kind of action that day. So yeah, I wanted to share that with you, Christine, and your audience as something to inspire them.
Thank you so much. We've made a link so that you can get this free download. And that link is maketimeforsuccesspodcast.com/Rob, which is ROB. And thank you, Rob, for that. Again, it's maketimeforsuccesspodcast.com/Rob for that list of 33 ways to create your prosperous life. It sounds wonderful. And Rob, thank you again from the bottom of my heart. And I look forward to our future collaborations. I'm sure there will be more.
Thank you, Christine. It's been an absolute pleasure.
All right, everyone. That's another episode wrapped. I look forward to seeing you next Thursday. Again, thanks so much for being a listener of the Make Time for Success podcast. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Make Time for Success podcast. If you enjoyed what you've heard, You can subscribe to make sure you get notified of upcoming episodes. You can also visit our website, maketimeforsuccesspodcast.com, for past episodes, show notes, and all the resources we mention on the show. Feel free to connect with me over on Instagram too. You can find me there under the name Procrastination Coach. Send me a DM and let me know what your thoughts are about the episodes you've been listening to. And let me know any topics that you might like me to talk about on the show. I'd love to hear all about how you're making time for success. Talk to you soon.